What's up, guys? One of my last patients canceled on me, so I just had a few minutes. I was thinking about sharing this just with a friend of mine who like to geek out over this stuff with every once in a while, but I thought, why not share it with everybody? So I just noticed something interesting. As I've posted about before, I wear this Whoop strap primarily to monitor my sleep. Getting enough adequate sleep is something I have certainly struggled with at various points in my life. And so I wear this. It measures your sleep, the different stages of sleep, time in bed. It also measures things like resting heart rate when you're sleeping, and heart rate variability. And, like how this is kind of an emerging science. And so how much weight you put in this data is my mind is still not made up about that. I'm always sort of skeptical about new things until we get the science fleshed out or whatnot. But my experiences in general have been that how I feel generally does correlate pretty well with resting heart rate when I'm sleeping and heart rate variability. If you're not familiar with heart rate variability, it is the difference in the time between your heartbeats. So even if your heart is beating at a constant rate, let's say 70 beats per minute, and you hook up to a monitor and it just says 70 beats per minute. If you were to measure the interval between each beat very precisely, you would see that it is different. It's not exactly the same amount of time between each beat. And how much that varies, how much variation there is in that number, depends primarily on your autonomic nervous system, the balance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic input, and where you are in terms of like your systemic recovery status. If you're fresh, if you're overtrained, can certainly affect that number. This is also used in situations like an ICU where a patient may be, we're concerned that someone's becoming septic or something like that. They'll slap a HRV monitor on them to give them another data point to try to see where they're doing as far as their autonomic nervous system. I remember when I was finishing residency, this was just becoming sort of common practice in the ICU. I mean, the technology had been there for a while, but I think my last 2 years, it was pretty fairly common to walk in an ICU room and have someone who had an HRV monitor. They were being monitored or whatnot. So anyway, how I feel subjectively generally does kind of correlate with resting heart rate at night and heart rate variability. With HRV, I should specify, higher numbers are better, lower numbers, no bueno. And so, I've been going, I periodize my training. And so over the past several weeks, I've been progressively, I use a progressive overload type of system and whatnot. And I also progress volume over, a block, mesocycle, whatever terminology you want to use. I don't get too fancy about that sort of thing. But I've been progressing both load and slowly progressing volume, and I've got sort of things mapped out or whatnot, and I've got sort of another 2 weeks of this block of this progression, and that's sort of mapped out nicely with how things align in my life, my professional life, what I've got going on, travel, that sort of thing and whatnot. So it'd be nice if I could stick to that schedule. I was just talking to a friend of mine, a guy who I train with every once in a while last week, or actually over the weekend. I was just talking about how I tell I'm kind of starting to feel a little more run down, a little more delayed onset muscle soreness. Subjectively, just this vague sort of systemic fatigue, like I'm almost, maybe, pushing it a little too hard. And I don't want to hit the wall before I got another 2 weeks of this. And interestingly enough, during that time also, I noticed there was a significant rise in my resting heart rate at night and a significant drop in heart rate variability. And I'm not close to a competition or anything right now, so I've got some flexibility. I can sort of experiment with what I'm doing and that sort of thing. And so last week, I pulled back a little bit on training volume, no more than 10%, just a little bit, right? Same load, same intensity, but just pulled back basically on number of sets. I dropped off a couple sets per body part. And today, when I checked or whatnot, and if, I'm back in my normal zone for average heart rate variability. And sure enough, resting heart rate is now back a lot closer to what is typically my average zone. I'll take some screenshots from the Whoop app and throw them up there so you can see actual numbers or whatnot. But it's enough of a difference that the Whoop app actually noticed it and gave me an alert and said like, hey, you're now back in your like average zone for HRV. And it actually, last week when I was kind of feeling more run down or whatnot, my Apple Watch had actually sent me an alert saying resting heart rate has been significantly higher this week or something like that. So I just think that's interesting because I like this, sciencey kind of stuff. So listen, I'm not saying that like I certainly don't make all training decisions based on numbers that this thing gives me. By my very nature, as I think any science-based person should be, I'm very skeptical about all this stuff, all the any claims that this company makes about their product or their data, their predictive value. New and emerging science, we always have to view this with a healthy dose of skepticism and also understand the limits of where we're at, understanding like all this sort of stuff. So I'm not saying you should go out and buy a Whoop strap. I'm not saying you should monitor your HRV or any of this stuff. It's interesting. It's interesting for me. I enjoy it. This thing, it gives me accountability with my sleep. If you have to send check-in pictures to a coach, you're probably less likely to cheat on your diet, right? If I know there's going to be a number on an app telling me like you had great sleep or you had, poor sleep, I'm maybe going to be a little more motivated to get to bed early. That's just sort of like subconscious human nature that you can't avoid. So I find the accountability aspect actually a little worthwhile. This thing is not cheap. The subscription or whatever is not cheap. So I'm certainly not advocating everybody to run out there and get one of these. There are other companies. There's an Aura Ring, which is actually, I used to have one of those. I like this one a little bit better. It's interesting. In 50 years, we're gonna understand this a lot more, and we might be able to make training decisions based on much more objective data. It's just interesting. The way I felt definitely correlated with the numbers. And I was able to modulate training volume in a way that then changed the numbers in a beneficial way. And I'm going to push hard another couple weeks, and then on into a new phase of my training for a little while. So, if you got questions, hit them up down below. I'm certainly not an expert in this. I'm not an HRV expert. I'm not an expert in sleep medicine or sleep science or anything like that. I do find all this stuff interesting, as with any aspects of human physiology as it relates to sports and exercise and fitness and, physique competition and all that sort of stuff. So, if you want to geek out over this and discuss, you can hit me up in the comments or whatnot. But, let me know. Do you have a Whoop strap? Do you enjoy it? Do you find any utility in it? I don't know. Who knows? Thanks.